crochet hook in hand, anything is possible, except reuniting with your ex-girlfriend. Thank you for joining the Escape With Me book club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, Lizzie Sawyer.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we are going to fictional city, Wisconsin, United States. Published April 1986, The Cat Who Saw Red is the return of the Cat Who series after a 18-year hiatus. That's crazy. For some reason, why? No one knows. Anyway, after such a long break, is the author able to return into the swing of things, or has the mysterious break caused the cat's instincts to dull? No one knows. I've done so much research, and just no one knows why. It went away, and then it came back with a vengeance, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, I thought this book was still right as good as the ones prior.
Yeah, and so I mentioned in the last episode that I'm really surprised that this book happens after the break, because in the next book, we're going to have a total shift in everything.
Makes you wonder if this one was written before the break, but didn't get published until after the break.
Or at least she had written like a lot of notes and had a draft or something, you know?
Yeah.
Because it does flow along just as well. But before we get too into that, background, I've read this a bunch of times. And despite that, the brain does great memory things, and I remembered the book differently when I read it. It was interesting rereading it, and something that happens at the very end I thought happened like halfway through the book. And so, funny how memory does things. So I know the book, but apparently I don't know the book. This was your first time reading it, though.
Yeah, and it was hard to find.
Yes, for some reason the audiobook is not on Audible. But where there is a will. Age level, this is adult. And content warning, weirdly enough, the language, because the third book had a little language, PG-13, but this book had, not so much it'd be distracting, but it had actual curse words in it.
Infrequently enough that I honestly don't remember there being curse words in it.
Fair. I think it was just a little, because I read the original trilogy and then this book, and it kind of hit me as a stark contrast with some of the words that were used. It is not used often, maybe 4 words in the entire book, but the caliber was higher than what we have seen in the past. So, you know, it's the 80s. Things change. It's not 1960 anymore. So there is language, murder, abuse, emotional and mental, and animal cruelty and death of a child. Very sad.
More death than I was expecting.
A lot more death than normal. Maybe not. Let's see. There's 2 deaths in the last book. There's 1 death in the second book, and then there's 2 deaths in the first book. So yeah, this is 3 if you're counting the cat.
Yeah, I guess we should count the cat, because the cat's important to the solution of the mystery.
Yeah. But to judge a book by its cover,
it looks like the other book covers.
It does.
Which is good.
Mine has a rolling pin on it, and so I thought, okay, so it has something to do with cooking? I don't think it does on yours, but mine did. For whatever reason, I have this book, the next book, and the one after that as a trilogy in hardback, so it's all combined together.
Yeah, no, mine just had broken pottery, a stamp with Florida on it, and grapes, because food.
So what did you think of the cover? What were you expecting?
I didn't really look at it.
Fair.
To be honest. I was like, oh yes, finally, here it is. Let's start listening. And then I listened to it.
You expected Quillerin and his cats.
Without looking at the cover, I was expecting Quillerin to end up with a new beat, like normal, that ended up with him living somewhere else, like normal, potentially getting another cat, like normal.
He does not get another cat, I will say that.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting the diet.
No, it was an interesting take on it, I think. Because I've read a bunch of other cozy mysteries where it's food central, and it's like, this chapter is about murder, but actually it's about us sitting down and eating all this food.
And he doesn't get to eat any of it.
No, but it kind of made it more compelling a little bit.
It did.
But I just want to say, you mentioned the formula. He gets a new beat. He lives somewhere new. Something with the cats.
Like always.
The next book is different. I'm just going to say that.
Oh no.
She went in a totally different direction after this book.
Well, she had a break and was like, you know what?
She had 18 years. That is a legal adult.
Yeah, she was like, you know what? I'm feeling like this now with these characters.
So I'll just leave you with that is all I'm going to say about the 5th book on. Still good. I still enjoy them, but it's so drastically different.
Well, I want to assume that since it's the same author, I'll still enjoy the books.
Yeah, I still enjoy it. It's so different. Like I said, I was surprised that this book happened after the break, but maybe it confirmed to her it's time to switch things up. But to kind of talk about the book, you're right. He gets a new beat. He's on the gourmet. Can we talk about Percy just has these ideas?
Can we talk about how Quill goes out to several expensive restaurants and doesn't write anything on any of them?
Nope.
They actively mention it.
Yes, he has mentioned a couple times in the series, like, oh, I'm so skilled that I don't have to write down anything. Granted, he eats like 3 bites of each meal.
See, but he's going to work and his buddy's like, hey, can you write this bit on this dog food? And he's like, I'm not writing this bit on this dog food. And the other guy's like, dude, you haven't been writing anything. Can you please?
You haven't given us anything, man.
And Quill's over here like, I'm trying to solve a murder. I don't have time.
I need column. But then he talks about some of the other columns he does. Because he's like, oh, I did the dog food thing. And then the mouse piece. Which, by the way, this has been getting set up. This is part of the threads from the other book. Meeting Robert Mouse.
I got halfway through the book and I was like, I should have written down all of the names like Sam does when she writes notes. And I regretted it. There's too many people in that house.
Yes, so Robert Mouse has been set up since book 2. We first meet him in book 2 when Coco digs his nails into the phone book and opens up to T-Handle, Hansblow, Burris, Moss, and Castle. And then Quill just offhandedly says, oh, look, you caught a mouse. And then in the 3rd book, he's the lawyer for Andy's estate. And it's mentioned in the book that Quillerin calls and some guy named William picks up and it says, hey, he's cooking. He's not going to want to talk to you. And Quillin manages to get him to talk to him. And here he is. He apparently runs a gourmet boarding house with a guy named William. I was so impressed that the strings continued so good. Zoe Lambreth shows up.
For half a second.
But Zoe Lambreth shows up. Man, it was crazy. But yes, so he's on a gourmet beat, but he's also on a diet. So he's going to be stubborn and he's going to lose pounds and he's determined.
I was really expecting him to give up the diet. I was expecting that to be a subplot. And to his credit, he does not. He sticks with the diet through the whole book.
He works so hard.
I would not be able to. With that much good food, there would be no way.
Yeah, because even the beginning, Arch is like, hey, just put off your diet for like 3 weeks. We know Percy's big ideas.
Dude, by the next book
last that long. Like, what happened to that magazine that Quill was doing? It was supposed to run for 52 weeks. I guess either got sent to the women's department like he threatened, or they stopped doing it.
This is after the break. It's been 18 years. That magazine's done.
So it's just very funny. And it's also kind of funny to see how long Quillerin can use, oh, I'm new in town.
Hey, I use that forever, man. The last town I lived there for 4 years, and I was still doing I'm new in town. I don't actually know where that is. I'm so sorry. Which was not a lie. I had no idea where anything was.
It's so funny. He's been there for, I think now canonically a year. A little over a year. Because he started in February, and now it's a couple months after another February. So he'd been there for a little over a year, and he's still like, I'm new in town. He's going to be new in town again soon. But anyway, we find out that he's 6'2" and 46 years old.
That's not that old.
And we learn a little bit more about his ex-wife.
We do.
We're getting pieces. Last book, we learned that her family is wealthy, but she's in a sanitarium again.
That's nice.
So this book, he won $1,000 prize in the last book. And so he's like, yeah, I sent her a couple $100. And Archie's like, her parents are rich. And he goes, yeah, but she's sick. And it's like, let the parents deal with it. I have so many questions that aren't going to get answered.
Nope.
But apparently she was a marketing executive, probably for a newspaper, because that seems to be how they met. I have so many questions. Anyway, instead we get to learn about Joy, who childhood sweetheart, maybe? Or first adult girlfriend. It kind of made it seem like,
I mean, he talked about her like they grew up together.
yeah.
And then definitely mentioned that they were engaged at one point in time before she ran away.
Yeah, and Arch Ricker knew her, and Quill met him when they were quote-unquote cub reporters, so little babies, starting out on their newspaper journey. And then I think he mentions her being a teenager at one point. So it seems like childhood sweetheart going in, and then she gets cold feet, and then she just disappeared.
Yeah, I didn't trust her right off the bat.
Yeah, Joy.
Especially with how many mentions of her being impulsive were said out loud.
Yeah. I didn't trust her because I was like, no, Quill, you have Mary. Mary's awesome from the last book.
I was more like, she's going to take your money and run.
Yeah. But in this book, he meets up with Rosemary.
She's pretty dope.
She's awesome, but I have no idea what age she is.
I would have pegged her in like her 60s, honestly.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, she looks like she's in her late 30s and whatever. And then he keeps finding out things about it. It's like, oh, I have kids. And he's like, oh, you have kids. Yeah, my grandchild's violin recital. He's like, your grandchild's violin recital? He's like, yeah, he's 12. He's the youngest. The other two are in college.
I mean, it wouldn't have been super weird for her to have kids really young in this time period.
It wouldn't, but it was, as the book goes, it's a little bit of a gag. As the book goes, her age keeps going up and up. And at that point, Quiller was like, can I have the wheat germ you've been eating? Whatever you're doing is great.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly doesn't mind that she may or may not be older than him. So, you know, good for them. They both seem happy.
I think it rounds out because he did date Koki, and I feel like Koki was like mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
And that was a little young for him. It evens out. We got an older woman up in here.
And she's pretty cool.
She's pretty cool. I like her a lot. I don't know if I like her better than Mary. I like Rosemary, though. It's not like the first and second book where I was like, I don't like you. Go away. Also, she's Canadian. That's fun. But something interesting you do find out, Joy has long chestnut hair, specifically, and a tiny figure. And that's just like Zoe and Koki. Both of them had brown hair and slim figures and whatever. And it was like, oh.
Apparently Quill's ex-wife does too.
Yes! He has a type. That's why I'm all for Mary, who looks completely different, and also Rosemary, who also looks completely different.
Did you ever watch Parks and Rec?
Yes, a good bit.
Did you watch enough to clock that that's Ron's type too?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. What can I say? He read these books.
I guess.
But he moves into this gourmet boarding house because of course he does.
Of course he does. Even though it's kind of pricey and that's not really Quill's thing. Must be frugal.
He gets the furniture though, which I would be so mad.
They kept talking about that rug and the cat's messing with the rug. And I was like, they're going to mess up that rug and you're going to have to pay for it, Quill.
Probably already had to pay for the Danish modern chair that Coco ate. Oh gosh, yes. And I kept thinking about it because he rents an apartment that's furnished only because this guy used to work there, but he moved to Florida. So he's trying to find a place. And then he's going to send for his furniture.
Yeah.
And Quill just moves right in.
This is fine. Okay.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, so he moves in. And everyone in the house has to have something to do with cooking. So you have Robert Mouse, who's a lawyer who cooks gourmet meals every night. I'd pay a little extra to have a gourmet meal every single night. He doesn't have to pay for food in this entire book.
And for breakfast and for lunch. I'd gained so much weight, it would not be okay.
Between the boarding house and the Fluxian paying for all of his meals, he didn't have to buy food this entire book.
Except for the cats.
Except for the cats.
Because there was the canned cat food debacle.
He's always like, I need to save money.
And the cats are like, no, you don't.
But you didn't have to buy food this entire book. Do you know how much money I could get together by not having to buy food? Anyway, the important thing is he gets a room with furniture. He brought that coat of arms, though.
Did you think he wasn't gonna?
I just love it. All the strings are there. I just really appreciate the continuity. If you were reading the books back to back, which I've done in the past, and I didn't know about the gap, I would have not expected that big of a gap between them. But anyway, that's Robert Mouse. So you have William, who's actually not really related to cooking. He helps around the house. He's kind of a houseboy. And Mouse is putting him through art school. So in return, he does labor around the house for, I guess, room, board, and tuition.
Seems fair to me. For the little bit of work that he does, I guess.
For real, though. But I kind of liked him still.
Oh, no, yeah. No, he's great.
And we get Odd Bunsen later in this book, but he reminds me a little bit of Odd Bunsen, but younger, without 6 kids. And a 7th on the way, apparently.
Apparently.
Oh my gosh. But I liked William. He's just like a fun guy. And then you have Hixie Rice, who is a writer for a advertising company that does a bunch of food stuff or whatever. She's okay. I'm not a fan of her. She comes across a little desperate.
Just a little.
I got tired talking to her, listening to her talk to Quill. I wasn't even involved. But there are good things about Hixie, absolutely. But she is so desperate about having a husband, it does kind of show.
I mean, this is still early days, years ago.
She's literally 24. Girl, calm down.
Yeah, which is old for the time period.
Calm down. You're fine.
Going to be an old maid. I'm already an old maid. By those standards.
But the first time you meet her, she's like, but don't I have such a good disposition? And it's that type of baiting that she does, where she wants you to agree with her and be like, yeah, you're so great, Hixie.
She's insecure.
Oh, she is so insecure. And she is having an affair with a married man. Dan! I'm sorry. How do you fall for Dan?
Mr. Have I shown you the clipping that I keep in my pocket that says that I'm so great and no one else knows what they're talking about? Because obviously I'm so great because this one person said that I'm so great.
Dan! I do not understand. She's having an affair with him. She lives basically in the same house with them. So she has meals every day. And so she sees how terrible he is to his wife.
Who also lives in the same house with them.
Why would you want that? Why would you pick that up? If you did get married, why do you think you'd be different? Maybe she's just that desperate where she doesn't even care. She'll take a ring and be treated terribly, but he's the worst. The worst. The first dinner they have or whatever, his wife apparently made the plate set because they're, oh goodness, a little bit of setup. They have nothing to do with food. They're both potters.
This is Dan and Joy. Dan's married to Quill's childhood sweetheart, Joy.
Yes.
Just for a little context.
Before we just go on about Dan sucks and his wife also sucks. To reminisce about our first episode.
His wife's okay. We don't really get to see enough of her to judge her.
But Hixie, Dan, the first dinner they're together, she apparently made the plate set, Moss bottom, and it's cool and whatever. It was like a 24 cent, and someone was complimenting her.
Joy made the plate set.
Joy makes the plate set, and there's 24 of them, and people are complimenting. Like, this is really good. It's good, whatever. And he's like, that's nothing. When I was in California, I made 64 plates or something like that. I'm going to get the numbers wrong because I was rolling my eyes so far into my head. And then he pulls, but in history, there was a guy who made like 1,000.
It's like, oh, you think that's great? My wife actually sucks.
Hixie, that one. And he's not handsome either. He's gangly and doesn't shave enough. Not enough to have a beard, but you know that unkept. Ugh, Hixie, I don't trust you because your taste in men is so trash.
You can be a decent person and have trash taste in men.
Not this one, though.
I thought Hixie was okay.
She is okay. I will give her an okay. I like Joy more than I like Hixie, if we're looking at the chart of okay.
I mean, Hixie's definitely the kind of person where it's like, yeah, I'll hang out with you once a month, maybe if that, because the energy levels would be way too high for me.
She's an energy vampire, absolutely.
Just the energy suck.
Then you have Rosemary, who we talked about briefly, who comes to love interest. She owns a health food store, and she knits, which is pretty cool.
One of us. One of us.
She gives the cats a ball of yarn, which is relevant. But it's also sweet. I like her. She's like, hey, I thought your cats might like this. Gives them a ball of yarn.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. But she owns a health food store, and at first everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, health food store. But like I said, you get to the end and you learn she looks late 30s, and she's in probably mid 60s. This girl looking great. Whatever she's selling, please. Wheat germ.
It's apparently working.
This wheat germ stuff is here for it. If Quill got married to her and wanted to stay on this diet and stay trim, she could totally help him.
Absolutely.
Eat food and be full, because he is
really bad at this. Yeah.
Not full for most of this book. Eat food, be full, be satisfied, but also eat healthy. I totally believe she could do that. She's a fun time. She doesn't get as much screen time as I would like, because we do have to focus on the joy part of it a lot, but you know. Then we got some McDonald's hate. Charlotte Roop works for the Heavenly Hash Houses. It was started by one guy, and then some other guys came in and bought the place and turned it into a chain, and they're not exactly known for their quality. What does that sound like?
Every fast food joint, honestly.
True. Anyway, she's obsessed with the place. She loves it. She's obsessed. She loves her bosses. She worked for the original guy, loved that guy, obsessed. Also, she's really annoying about Quill hangs out with some of the women, and she's just like, hate.
It's like, you know they all live in the same house, right?
Calm down.
No, he's obviously banging both of them.
And I hate it because it's not even like, oh, I disapprove of this or whatever. She goes to Mouse about it. Lady. Anyway, the important thing about her is she has a very tight moral code that she sticks to.
Very tight.
Also, she does crosswords, and that comes up a lot. So then we have Max Sorrell, who owns the Golden Lamb Chop and is kind of a ladies' man, but we don't ever actually really see much evidence of that. He just has a very charming smile to women, I guess. But his restaurant is top tier, really fancy, and he usually is doing fine, but recently some rumors have been going out about it, and it's a bunch of different ones, and they're circulating, and you can't find who the heck started them. It's a slander campaign. It's everything from there's cat meat in the food to the chef has a horrible illness to a bunch of things where it's just enough to be a little ridiculous, but it keeps people away too. So he's not having a good time of it. And I think the last one is Mrs. Marin, who is a housekeeper for Mouse House and helps Robert cook and stuff.
I honestly thought when Quill first moved in and she sees the cats, her first question, the first question out of her mouth are
they expensive?
Are they expensive? And I was like, this woman's gonna steal those cats and sell them. And then they disappear.
Under whose watch do they disappear and quote unquote die?
I'm like, she sold them. She sold the cats. Hands would fly. Don't mess with my cats.
I think he skirted that question really well because he just replied, they're very important to me.
Yep.
That was such a good deflection, but you're right. That was her first question.
It went right in my notes. I was like, she's gonna steal those cats.
She doesn't.
Nope. She's fine.
But she does claim they're dead.
Yep.
When they just got out on the roof.
They're dead. You can't even bury them. I called sanitation.
And then she ran away and quit her job because she was so upset. Granted, she's had a rough go of it. A couple weeks ago, apparently, she was watching her grandson, and it makes it sound like he got out of her sight. She didn't see it happen because she mentioned it was 2 weeks before they found this poor little kid's body. But he was playing by the river. There's a river by this house, by the way. And one of the boardwalks was loose, and then he fell into the river and drowned. So she's having a really rough time of it. I'm surprised she was able to manage that, because if that happened to me, I would just fall apart. So she's having a rough go of it. And she ends up telling him, I told you they were dead, because not knowing is so much worse. And I think that also parallels the Joy thing, because Joy had a cat and then it went missing. And she never knew what happened to it. And so that really upset her. And her husband, this
kept talking about people doing experiments on cats.
Kidnapping cats to do experiments on them. What is wrong with you?
Oh, and she's like, you know, this makes me uncomfortable.
Hixie, why? You are there when he does this.
And he apparently does stuff like this all the time. She's like, yeah, I almost drowned, and I really don't like looking at the river, and so I closed the blinds, but Dan keeps opening the blinds so that I have to look at the river.
This is why I didn't hate Joy too much, because her husband is trash.
Absolute trash.
Oh, anyway, so she wants a divorce from her husband because he's the worst.
Obviously.
And so as Quillerin,
But she doesn't ask him for money straight up. He's just like, how much would you need?
and she says $1,000 because she needs to do this lawyer and whatever. And I'm just, that's crazy expensive for 1984. My mother-in-law got a divorce for $1,000 in 2023. That's a lot of money. That's crazy. But anyway, what is that? What was this published? 1986. Which granted, divorces can get very expensive. But just for a retainer fee, that's kind of crazy.
There wasn't Google back then.
True.
She's kind of like, this number sounds about right.
All right, let's see. That'd be a little less than $3,000 today. That's a lot for a start. I could see it getting expensive as it drags on because Dan would definitely be a jerk about it.
Oh, absolutely.
So I could totally see it getting up there, but I don't know. I was a little suspicious about how high the number was that she was asking.
I wasn't, but I don't know anything about how much lawyers go for.
Fair. And like I said, maybe this is just top tier because apparently Mouse is a part of the top tier. And granted, he does corporate. He's a private lawyer for a firm that does food accounts. So he referred her. So I would assume whoever he referred her to would also be pretty top tier still.
Which is kind of what you need against a man like Dan.
The worst. Anyway, it's so much money.
And she said that number, and me and Sam are both over here like, she's just going to take your money and run.
Oh, absolutely. This is sus as all get out.
And then she disappears, and we're like, oh, she took the money and ran.
$750 is what he gives her because that's all he has left of his prize money and whatever. And I'm just, did he get that back?
I want to assume so, because when the check was actually cashed, the bank called him and was like, yo,
you're overdrawn. And he was like, not that much.
Fraud? And he was like, it canceled that. So I assume he kept the money.
Well, no, because he said that I wrote it for $750, and then because you can only hear Quill's side because someone's in the room with Robert Mouse was in the room. He gets a phone call. He's on the phone, but when he turns around, Robert's not there anymore. But we get that side of the conversation, and at the end, he says, "I'll hunt it down on my end."
I just want to assume that the bank was like, well, we can't. Because the check that they got would have still said the incorrect number, so they would have still had to void that out. They wouldn't have been like, oh, it's actually 700 and blah, blah. We'll just fix it. You know, they'd be like, oh, well,
that's a fraudulent check. We should put a stop. Yeah.
Just because that's how banks work. You need to make a new check if you want the money to go through. So I want to assume that Quill's money is fine.
Because Dan does get the money. Confirmed. Because that's how he paid for the champagne. He admits it to Quillerin. Quillerin confronts him and it says, hey, you cashed the check. He's like, well, I totally did cash the check, but Joy's the one who did it. Put the 1 in the 17. And then, oh, I wired her half and gave me half, and that's how I paid for the bubbly. Oh, I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want you to know that's how she's spending your money and whatever. So he got money, and I have questions. Anyway, the point is, though, someone took it and changed it to 1700 instead of 700. How much space is Quinn leaving between his words that someone could manage to put teen in and it not be sus?
Clearly it was sus because the bank called him.
They called because he was overdrawn.
I know, but it was probably still sus.
You were $1,000 overdrawn. What type of check are you trying to write here? But that's all I could think, because it makes sense. Yeah, you put a 1 in front of the 7. Okay, yeah, if you're not being careful and put the $sign and whatever. But teen isn't something you can just squeeze in there, you know? Anyway, that was my thought, was what is your handwriting like that you could squeeze teen in there and it'd be legible? Anyway, I don't know if we ever get anything about his handwriting, because we know her handwriting. Oh, maybe he should have known. Well, I guess they never saw the check. But when Joy writes, she does that cursive where it's not cursive. It's just looping things over and over again.
I hate when people write like that. People are like, oh, you can't read cursive? I'm like, I can read cursive. I can't read whatever gibberish that is.
Because he says, oh, she never crosses her T's or loops her H's? Like, I've heard about crossing your T's and dotting your I's, but how do you not loop an H? What?
I guess it would end up looking like an N.
It would look like a U, because that was kind of what he does. He does like, oh, this is to Quill, and it's like Q double U, 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 U. That's how it reads. But anyway, her terrible handwriting aside, but also not aside, because it's a little bit part of the point. So Joy goes missing, and Quill doesn't know, oh, is it sus? Is she in trouble?
Is she just vanished?
Did she run off with my money? Is she going with the other dude that used to live in my apartment? Is she going with Robert Mouse? Because there's this whole plot point about Dan. Oh, I got a letter from her saying to send her clothes to Florida, Miami.
See, but that's suspicious because the night she asked for the money, she said she hated Florida. And the night that she asked for the money, Quill's woken up at like 3 a.m. because there's a scream.
And then there's a scream, and then there's somebody's car driving away from the house.
Leaving very quickly.
So he's not sure. Did she run off? Did she get kidnapped? Is she murdered? Did Dan murder her? So Joy's gone. And somebody's trying to cash his money fraudulently.
Well, not till the end.
See, that's one of the things that I thought happens earlier. There is so much that happens in the last 3 chapters that ties so much stuff up. But anyway, even the last chapter in and of itself has so much stuff happen to tie up everything that's been going on. He hangs out with William for a little bit, and William is all, I want to be a PI. I love mystery stories. I'm into all of that. And you already have an example of him sneaking into Quill's room and writing DOG on the typewriter because apparently Coco has upgraded from just changing the margins to actually typing on the typewriter.
Coco's one of the Siamese cats. It's Coco and Yum Yum.
And so that's the gimmick of Coco because it's always something in each of the books.
Yeah, the last book, it was the phone book.
No, the phone book was the second one, or the dictionary was the second one. The third one was them sneaking through this little tunnel thing and stealing stuff from other apartments.
Because the last one was the antique one, wasn't it?
Yes. So this one, he writes things on the typewriter. One of the things he writes is 30. And that was kind of cool for me because he mentions, oh, that's the newspaper. Basically, you write copy and at the bottom you put -30 and that's how they know it's the end of the story. They still teach that. I learned that. When I took both of my media writing classes, I had to put -30 at the end of my papers. It was really cool. I was like, oh my gosh, I know that. This is the thing that I know. I feel so special right now. So that's one of the things he writes. That's about the time when Joy disappears. And so he's concerned that means the end of Joy. It is, honestly.
Which it does.
I don't think we've even tried to hide how much we dislike Dan. So.
Well, it's because he sucks.
He sucks so much. But does that, and then he types PB at a different time. And at first, he finds this around the time the cats are missing. So he thinks at first it means poisoned beef. It means someone has poisoned the cats and that's how they died. Cats come back in, it's fine or whatever. He doesn't decide what it means until the very end of the book because William disappears.
What happened was the housekeeper,
Mrs. Marin,
that one, was cleaning the apartment while Quillen was out doing this writing thing that they wanted him to do. He took a weekend with Rosemary. And so Mrs. Marin's cleaning the apartment, opens the window, doesn't close it quite tight enough, and the cats get out. And so the next day when she's up there to feed them, they're gone. And she's got no clue where they are. And so she thinks they're dead. But they're just out, stuck on the roof. But they tap on the window when Quill gets home and he lets them in and they're fine.
But now that you said all that, wouldn't she notice that the window's open? So what she said happened is that she shook out the rug, which it has to be a different rug. There's no way she shook out an entire bearskin rug, right? There has to be another one. Anyway, the cats were asleep on top of the refrigerator. She shook the rug out the window and she closed it. And Quill thinks, oh, maybe you didn't close it well enough. And that's how they got out. But maybe they trapped themselves. Because if it was open, then they could have come back in. So maybe they got out and trapped themselves. I'm just going to go with that.
Yeah, you know how air pressure does weird things when the window's open and the doors open or closes or whatever? Maybe they got out, they opened the window, they got out, and then the door closed or she left or whatever, and it shut the window.
Or Coco closed it or something, yeah.
Yeah, or wind from outside or something.
Now William's missing. And can we talk about how no one gave a crap?
Oh, yeah, he goes out with everybody, he goes out with William and tells William about the thing, and William's like, I'm gonna investigate. Yeah, no one gave a crap except William's girlfriend.
Yeah, mom's not calling around. She's a sort of fiance. I don't know. Anyway, they're both art students, and so that was the boho vibe. She was so cute, though. And I'm a little mad that Quillen was like, oh, it's been 48 hours since he's been missing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, in 48 hours, call the police if it... No!
Well, by that point, he was probably already dead.
He was probably already dead, but we could have looked for it anyway.
I was really sad she killed him off. I liked him.
I was so sad. We'll get to my thoughts on the people that got murdered in this book, but yeah, no, that was really sad, but no one cared. I think Rosemary was worried about him.
Rosemary was worried about him, yes.
She said, oh, I felt like he needs an older woman to help guide him. That's not his mother, because apparently he does not have a good relationship with his mother. And yes, Rosemary, you're so... another bonus to Rosemary. She's very, very nice. But he keeps ringing up. Hey, where's William? Oh, well, he's not here. He was supposed to wax the floors. He was supposed to whatever. He's just missing. And Robert Mouse is just like, oh, yeah, youth. Cool, thanks, man. He didn't sleep in his bed. His fiance thinks he's missing.
His car is still here.
Also, there was a really cute moment where Quill was like, hey, make sure there's no sizable deductions from your joint bank account. And she's like, oh, absolutely. I'll definitely check.
There's only $18 in there.
There's only $18 in it. Oh my gosh. Oh, sweeties.
It'd be like, I would, but we only have $18 between the both of us, so.
Not gonna be much. Anyway, now both of them are missing.
Joy and William, yeah.
Quill thinks Dan did it.
Dan did it.
I mean, because he's right.
But there's no proof.
Which, granted, in all of these books, he's not always right.
Yeah, his mustache didn't do much tingling.
But even in this book, it's mentioned at the very beginning, Quill gets a look and he's like, an arch-ricker knows that means he has a hunch. And his hunches are either absolutely correct
or very wrong.
Or 100% wrong. Completely off base. Which is hilarious, and I love it, and it's true. But he has a pretty good feeling that Dan did it. He finds a peephole in his room, and now we have a whole other set of context we need to bring in.
It's a peephole into the pottery barn shed.
Yes, from his room. There are so many layers to this story. There's a lot of tea in this book. And I'm not just talking about the stuff that Quill drinks, because there is actually like a lot of tea mentioned in this book too as well. Physical and gossip. Both are very present. This house was created by the guy whose family started the Morning Rampage, which is the rival newspaper to Quill's newspaper. He created this rambling, weird house to get a bunch of art people together to do whatever bohemian art people do. And they threw parties. It was great. It was whatever. So he created this pottery, and there was this woman potter that he was just obsessed with. He wrote letters to her, and those letters were weird.
They were really weird.
They were so weird. Quiller gets to read one of them, and it's just, he calls himself Popsy to her, talks in the third person.
Love that. That's not weird.
And he goes on, oh, you're so beautiful, you're so wonderful, I can't wait to see you again. And it ends with, be good to Popsy or Popsy will spank. This woman did not like him. That's so freaking creepy. Anyway, she falls in love with this other dude. I guess he's a sculptor. I think my mind's telling me he's a sculptor. I may or may not be wrong. But fell in love with this other artist, and they were quote unquote having an affair, even though she was never with Penniman to begin with. And he installs this peephole from his room into the pottery to be able to catch them, catches them.
And catches them is such a weird word in this context because they're not together.
No, he's just this creepy dude using the fact that she lives under his roof against her. Because even the other artist, you meet one of them and she spills the tea even though she was like, oh, I don't want to say anything. And the newspaper has been hounding me for years and I never want to say anything ever. Anyway, you seem nice.
But you're pretty cool.
I know you're not going to print anything. And even Quill says, it's weird what people say to reporters and then get mad that it gets in print. But she spills everything. At the smallest provocation, I think she's had 2 glasses of champagne and maybe a brandy at this point, but she spills everything. The sculptor mysteriously drowns after this, and so it's like, hint, hint, Penniman did it, hint, hint. And then she, well, I don't know. They say she committed suicide, but I don't know if I believe her. I kind of think it was Penniman.
Wasn't it implied that she was pregnant, too?
Yeah, with the sculptor's baby. It's a whole thing. I'm a little bit sus.
Just a little.
We never get anything confirmed, but apparently there were letters in the pottery that Joy found, and she was going to blackmail the Pennimans to get the money. She was asking $5,000, by the way, for this blackmail, and that's why Quill ends up giving her the money to be like, don't get into blackmail. Joy being sketchy aside, the fact. I'm glad in the end Quill was like, I am in love with the memory of her, of the teenager that I know, the early 20-year-old that I know before she ran away. Did not have any feelings for this new joy that she is now. I was like, I'm glad for your closure that you were able to get that, but not great. So Dan starts making a big deal about this exhibit that he's putting on.
With his wife Joy, who is now missing.
With his wife Joy, even though Joy's not there.
And no one's seen their stuff because it's been locked up.
Yeah, he specifically is like, oh, it's locked up, you can't see it and whatever. He's, quote unquote, because through the peephole, Quillen has been able to see him transferring notes from one of Joy's journals, and the clothes he was supposedly sending to Miami he threw in the furnace. That's weird.
That's suspicious.
So Quill is up on game a little bit that Dan takes a bunch of pots, throws them in the river. Quill doesn't know what it is. He just knows he's threw a thing into the river. And so
I thought body when it was first mentioned.
Oh yeah, heck yeah. So Quill asks Odd Bunsen to ask his scuba diver friend, because of course, to go and check it out. The diver checks it out and it's Joy's pots, because there's a huge difference between Joy's work and Dan's work.
Because Dan puts weird nodules on the sides of his pots. The way it's described, it sounds like he just takes little chunks of clay and just sticks them on. Like, yeah, that looks nice.
That too. But Joy is able to actually do pottery. Apparently, Dan had some sort of injury, which I think happened after whatever show where he got his clipping. And that's why he's so touchy about it, because he never came to healthy terms about losing part of his thumb. And so instead of doing pots and circular things that you think of, he just rolls out clay and makes these square bowls and stuff. Just square stuff. He's literally called a slab potter, which is a little funny because Quillerin thought they said slob potter.
I have done classes in pottery, and pinch pots can be round. The way that I was thinking of it when they were describing it is that, yeah, he may be doing square things, but what it sounded like to me was he was doing rolls and then stacking the rolls in the shape that he wanted and then smoothing it out.
Yeah.
I've done a couple pots that way, but then it sounded like they were just describing him putting blobs on the outside, which the minimal that I know about pottery, which is still more than your average Joe, I'm pretty sure the chance of your pottery exploding from air buildup inside the clay is a lot higher if you just put blobs of clay on the side of your work like that.
Well, somehow he manages to not, but it's still not good. It's really bad. Everybody hates it.
Everybody hates it.
Even John Smith, which, hey, you were in the first book too. A lot of people from the first book actually kind of popped up a little bit, but do we even see the bartender? I don't think he is, because I don't have his name. Wow. Because he's in the press cub in the very beginning when he learns about his diet, and then he goes to work, and then they put him on the gourmet beat. Well, dang. Sorry, Bruno. I guess you can't talk to us about your high-class cooking or whatever, because he always has a hobby that's relevant. Anyway, that aside, he's setting up for this exhibit and whatever, but he has a new trick. He has this quote-unquote living glaze, in which...
And it's really pretty. The same glaze that's on all of Joy's pots that are now in the river.
Yes, and so Quill knows Joy came up with this. This was Joy's. You stole this from her. There is no way that if Joy was alive, you would steal this. So she is absolutely dead. It would get back to her. So sad.
There's no way she would let him take credit for that. She put a lot of work into that glaze.
But the exhibit happens. That's a whole bubbly conversation. Quill confronts him. And, I mean, I wouldn't have done it how he did, but gets out of him, oh yeah, I'll use some of your money to pay for this, because he does, like, it's really fancy and whatever. Going to Paris soon, traveling or whatever. A bunch of things, like Hixie, like, all this stuff comes up. And then Quillerin plays it off. He's like, oh, I'm just messing with you, whatever. And he's like, oh yeah, no, it's totally fine. Knowing what I know about the ending, this right here is so devious. Which, by the way, I thought he got the pot halfway through the book, but Dan gifts him 2 pots. One is blue, and he's like, hey, give it to your photographer friends, because at one point they used, oh, you're gonna be in the newspaper as a reason to basically go through all their stuff. Gives him that, give that to Odd Bunsen, but specifically gives him a red pot. He's like, hey, red's your favorite color, here you go. And so it looks at first like it's going to be this really nice gesture of, hey, between the two of us, it's fine, or whatever. Knowing what we know, That is some psycho level crap. We learn in like a page. Seriously, I thought he got the pot so much sooner and then he found out about it. But like the second to last chapter basically gets this pot, learns something from a pottery book and smashes the pot and gets upset. Doesn't tell us until the very last chapter after it and whatever. So we know he's upset. I'm just going to spoil it. It's red because he put dead bodies into the furnace. So he put Joy's dead body into the furnace, and the cat that Joy had was the test run, and so it gets this brilliant color red because blood.
Was the test run.
A little bit. Anyway, the point is, a dead body was in the fire when these were in the furnace, so it came out red. This man was so pissed off at Quill, he was like, you know what I'm gonna do? Basically, here's part of Joy's dead body. You said you like the color red. Oh my gosh. I don't know how he does it because he's an idiot. I think that's where I'm at with this. He's not smart enough to pull this off. Granted, he doesn't pull it off in the end. He gets caught because Quill, but this man, you know he's kind of narcissistic, but you don't necessarily think he's a serial killer who's so obsessed with his own art that he'll murder people. What fight were they having where he was like, he had to be planning to kill her? Because the cat is the test run, so unless he's going to go steal other animals, he was planning to kill Joy to put her in for the red pots. Ah! Welcome to the 80s. Everything's so dark. Anyway, he goes to bed. He takes a sedative because he's so upset. And I'm just like, bruh, call the police.
He has no proof. The bodies are gone. What is he gonna say? I think he called Odd and was like, yo, get the murder investigative chief or whatever to meet me in the club tomorrow.
I don't think I could have slept.
That's why he drugged himself.
He took a sedative. What the heck? Anyway, he takes a sedative to go to bed. I can't get over that. He takes a sedative, so he almost gets murdered, but thankfully Coco, or possibly Yum Yum, as Rosemary points out, threw the yarn around like a crazy person and the entire room's a web. So he tries to come in there with the rolling pin for pottery, and so this is where I was like, I was kind of right, because the book is about cooking, but the murder weapon is used for pottery. But he comes in with a rolling pin, and Quill wakes up because all this happens, and he's smashed his head on the ground. Is he dead?
Yeah, because he tripped on the yarn.
They never say.
Dan? No clue. I don't think they ever actually say.
Because in the past, like last book, a heavy iron crest that was on the front of a castle's gate falls on somebody, but they clarify, hey, he talked to the police and confirmed everything. And this one, Quillerin just tells Rosemary what happened. I think he's dead. That's a lot of dead bodies. But hey, they got that solved. There's no remains of Joyce because she's been cremated. They do find William's remains in this little subterranean place where they put the clay so it will ripen. And so the dead body was in there, which, by the way, when they were pretending to be like, oh, you're in the newspaper, Coco sniffs the ground where it is and they open it and he's like, oh no, there's rats in there. And they're like, well, okay, closes it. If they had been pushy about that room like they were with literally every other room, they would have found William's dead body. That makes me so sad that this could have been figured out. Anyway, so yeah, he killed his wife. Then William came and was blackmailing him. Not smart, my dude. We don't do that. And he accepted a drink from him because you find out he was killed with lead poisoning. Told you PB would come up again. Lead, some sort of poison with lead in it. And so that killed William, and he just stored his body in the slip tank. I think that's what they said. He stored his body there. He had to wait because the pots were in a state in which that he could not cremate another body. So he just had that hanging around.
Without destroying the pottery, yeah.
Oh, and by the way, the people that were bad-mouthing Maxwell is the Hash House brothers that currently own it. And Charlotte's really upset about it. She quit immediately. And she's going to totally testify in court so Maxwell can sue them for defamation. But it's okay that she quit her job because Robert Mouse had to retire early because he has a bunch of snobby opinions about food, but all his clients are the things he says he hates. And then that was printed in the press. So he had to retire, and now he can open the restaurant he's always wanted to. So Charlotte can manage the restaurant. Maxwell gets his life back. Hixie is now very single.
Very single. Which is probably better for her, honestly.
She really needs to take some time for herself. And yeah, that's the book. General thoughts. I do love that Quill keeps habits that he picks up in other books. For example, in the second book, he calls things drapes. And the designer's like, oh, we never call draperies drapes. And so for all of the books, he always says draperies. And after the second book, he starts describing all the colors in food, just like the designers did. Because there was a moment where he's like, oh, broccoli, green leather and stuff. And so he picks that up. And then he knows about antiques. Like there's a couple of antiques that comes up, and he knows about that. And he knows about the art stuff. The strings, they're so good. It's like we said, she either wrote this book in the 60s or she had enough notes / drafts that she was able to write it pretty easily. It really does seem to just continue after the third one. The only thing that stuck out to me was there's more language. But yeah, the strings are so good. I like it.
It's a good book. It's a good mystery. I pegged whodunit near the beginning just because Dan's awful.
He's the worst.
But I spent most of the book trying to figure out how he did it and where he put the body. Because you spend most of the book being like, there's no proof.
But also, there's kind of proof. Not proof like I can take it downtown and go to the police, but there's enough things that he does that's sus that you're like, you definitely did it.
You definitely did it.
How?
Where are all the pieces?
This is what I call a how-done-it instead of a who-done-it. Because they try to make loose connections like, oh, Max Sorrell, he's a ladies' man. Maybe he did something with... No.
She gave up on that like halfway through the book. She's like, nah, Dan clearly did it. Now we're just trying to figure out how.
But also no one cares that William's missing. You have a serial killer in your house. You're gonna take a sedative. Anyway.
Dude, none of these doors lock.
The key was in the kitchen. All the keys, like Mrs. Maron's keys that she uses to clean, are in the kitchen.
That's safe.
I know, right? So yeah, they are, but they're not. One question for the author. It's the question she never answered. Why the break? What happened? Why happened? What is going on? Because she will publish very consistently all the way until her death. The final book is listed, but it was never published because she was literally working on it when she passed away. So she gets very in a groove with these books. It was just 18 years. No idea.
Sometimes you just get into a funk, you know?
But I have so many questions. What's your question?
I'd want to know how much research she put into each book, how she went about researching each topic and deciding what the niche thing was going to be for each book.
Yeah, because she researches. Either that or she's already extremely knowledgeable in these random things. Rating. I would give it free gourmet food for life out of 10. I like her books. So that's half of me. Half of me is like, I love these books. They're amazing. They're wonderful. I love them. But the other part of me is like a disappointing meal out of 10 just because how freaking sad the book is. Because all the other murders, they were either unlikable people, had it coming. The guy that gets murdered in the second book, you kind of like it, but he's also two-faced and you're like, okay, I'm not surprised your ways caught up with you. And then in the third book, they're unlikable. But then this one, I mean, Joy's a little unlikable, but she didn't deserve to be murdered for it. And neither did William. It's just a little sad. So I'm both. A gourmet meal that's a little disappointing out of 10.
Mine's a rack of lamb that they lose money on every time they sell it out of 10. Delicious and underpriced.
Read again. Heck yes. I've read this like a bajillion times.
Yeah, I'll probably go through these again at some point. Not immediately.
Okay, let me say it like this though. I wouldn't pick this one if I was just looking at the books and I was like, oh, let me just read one real quick. I would never pick this one, but if I'm going through the series, I'm going to read this one. I'm not going to skip it.
Oh, if it's a series, I start at book 1.
Yeah.
Every time and then go through.
If I was like, oh, I just want a quick bite or whatever, I mean, I'd probably pick up the first one.
I never do a quick bite. This is definitely a book series I need to let sit for a little bit before I pick it up again, because I want to forget the mystery before I read it again.
Yeah.
There are some books where you get through the series and you're like, all right, cool. Time to start it over once again. Immediately. Let's go.
Yeah.
But that's not this series.
Favorite of the series so far. So this is going to be a tough question for you because it's been a hot minute.
It's been a minute.
I'm going to say the third one, The Cat Who Turned on and off. I think it's the best of the original trilogy. And it's the sad deaths for me. It's the fact like the cat didn't deserve it, Joy didn't deserve it, William didn't deserve it, and you find out it's Dan, yeah, but a bunch of people got murdered and it's really sad. None of them deserved it. And so I do think you get to the end of the third book and you're like, yeah, you've caught him. But you feel sad for Mrs. Cobb because her husband died, but I don't know. This one makes me so much sadder.
For me, it's probably between the first one and this one. And I say this one because from what I remember about the other three, I get more into the mystery with this one than I did with the other three. I was actually able to follow the pieces. And the first one because that sticks in my head the most out of the other three.
It's a very strong first book.
It's a good first book.
But have you read this book? If you could have a pet sidekick, what would it be? Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like. And if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring The Cat Who Saw Red with us.
Join us next time when we'll be covering Watership Down by Richard Adams.
I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Lizzie Sawyer.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.